Studies done over the past 15 years have recommended that Fire Station 8, which is currently located at Lee Highway and Culpeper, be relocated farther north to improve response times to Arlington residents in this part of the county. During the summer, a county plan for upgrading and relocating the station was presented at community meetings. And although most agreed that the upgrading and rehabilitation of the station should be done, there was disagreement as to whether it should be moved to a new location or whether the new location should be where it is now. In September, Acting County Manager Mark Schwartz recommended that a community task force be created to address the siting of Fire Station number 8. And at this meeting, we'll be discussing the issues surrounding that. We have 4 speakers. I'll give everyone a little brief intro right now. First will be Jim Schwartz. He's a deputy county manager. He is a former Arlington County Fire Chief, spent 11 years in that role, which was part of 32 years as part of the Arlington Fire Department. And he'll be presenting some information about the proposal and setting the stage for us first. After that, Darnell Carpenter, a longtime resident of the Halls Hill Highview Park neighborhood, will speak in favor of the move. Alexandra Bussian, the current president of the Langston Civic Association, will then speak on reasons as to why the station should remain at its current location, and then Richard Lolich, president of the Old Dominion Civic Association, will speak last, presenting some additional viewpoints as well. So, without further ado, I will introduce Jim Schwartz, Deputy County Manager.
Thank you, Scott, and good evening. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and talk to the Committee of 100. I really appreciate the opportunity. So my role here is to set up, I guess, the problem or the set of issues. So let me begin by sharing with everybody a little bit about what I'm sure you will hear about tonight, the study that was done that led to some of the conclusions that we made. It's commonly referred to as the Tri-Data study. Tri-Data is an outside organization that we hired, that we contracted to do a study of the current state of fire stations in the county. There was an earlier study done back in 1999, actually 2 studies, one done in 1999 with a follow-up in 2000 that made a number of recommendations, including the Station 8 proposal, which I'll get to in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And then in 2012, as fire chief, I commissioned a study again, in part because a lot of the development decisions that had been made in the county in the 12 years since the last study had been done gave me the impression that we were dealing with some new dynamics. Specifically, development decisions that looked at height requirements or height allowances, I should say, in the Roslyn area, additional density in the Crystal City area, that I thought were probably going to change some of the conclusions that had been reached 12 years before. Tri-Data, as it happened, was the contractor that was engaged again for the 2012 study. And so they did the same thing that they went about doing, albeit with some more updated tools that they had done back in 2000. Studies like this typically look at a couple of important factors in a community. They look at risk to the community. The reports, or the studies rather, will look at population and population density. And then perhaps most importantly, where is the demand for fire and EMS services? Where are the heavy draws? It might not surprise anybody to understand that the business of fire and EMS is really all about where the population is. So in Arlington, we see very heavy demand in the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, down in Crystal City. In fact, the busiest area in the county, the highest area of demand for fire and EMS service is in the Crystal City area. Typically, we see where there's a lot of people and a lot of density, that's where the concentration of activity is. The studies also look at national standards. The National Fire Protection Association sets standards for fire departments. They set standards around staffing levels. They set standards around response times. And obviously, it's response times that play key in the assessments that Tri-Data did both in 2000 and in 2012. The standards, just for your reference, are that we are supposed to arrive at a structure fire within 4 minutes, 90% of the time. The studies recognize that nobody can do it 100% of the time. The cost of that would be enormous. And in fact, in the fire protection business, it is widely acknowledged that there are very, very few communities in the country that can achieve a 4-minute response time, even at the 90th percentile, so much that the Tri-Data study said that a more realistic measure is 80% of the time. In terms of EMS, which obviously the fire protection is also the provider of in the community, the standard says that we must be able to provide basic life support protection, which all of our personnel are trained to provide within that same 4-minute window, and advanced life support paramedic within 8 minutes of dispatch. So a number of things have occurred over the years that place our fire stations where they are today. And in fact, the study back in 2000 made a number of recommendations, some of which changed with a 2012 study. But one change, or rather one suggested move of a fire station that was the same in 2000 and it is the same in 2012 was Fire Station 8, as mentioned before, at Lee Highway and Culpeper Street. It's a facility that was built in 1963. It has long since exceeded its useful age, and it is not in a condition to be rehabilitated. It must be replaced completely. Wherever it goes, the facility needs to be completely replaced. The studies in 2000 and in 2012 recommended, as you've heard, that it go further north. And after the 2000 study, as we began to look at possible locations, we concentrated on the site very close to here, 26th and Old Dominion, a piece of land that the county already owned. And in fact, with the goal of putting eventually the fire station there, the county has purchased a couple more pieces of that land over the ensuing years. One of the challenges with placing our fire stations, as I mentioned before, we have this issue of demand. Where is the concentration of activity? And as I said, most of our activity is in the concentrated corridors where there's a lot of population. The area further north that's primarily residential does not have a whole lot of demand. And in fact, the area that we are talking about better serving, in reality, has about 300 calls a year. About 2/3 of those are for EMS and about 1/3 are for fire. Despite the fact that we have stations that can't consistently meet the 4-minute response time goal, Station 8 is the only station that by its physical location cannot reach a high percentage of its response area within that 4 minutes. Other areas like Crystal City, which do not have a high percentage of meeting the 4-minute response time, because again, it's a very high demand area. Those units are out a lot and therefore must be serviced by more outlying stations. You know, stations further away must go in and do the work for Fire Station 5 on a more frequent basis. That problem can be alleviated by adding more units to the station in the Crystal City area. We can't alleviate the problem for Fire Station 8 by putting more units in the existing facility because the physical distance to the area that it serves remains the same. So the concept of moving Fire Station 8 further north it obviously has the objective of including more households within the 4 to 6 minute response time without taking away the demand that Station 8 still has back towards that highly concentrated area where there is a lot of population. It's important to remember that fire stations serve multiple areas. Station 8 serves the Ballston area as the second or third due company. And so while it is the first due in the northern part of the county, it on a daily basis gets drawn further south. So one of the balances we're trying to strike here is that if we move a new facility for Fire Station 8 too far north, we will increase the workload on the stations further south. They will be drawn further north to cover area that is currently covered by Fire Station 8. Moreover, if we go too far north with the relocation of Fire Station 8, it will do a large percentage of its response in Fairfax County, because we have an automatic aid agreement to share resources with both Alexandria and Fairfax. And if we go too far north, we will end up serving the served area of Fairfax more than we will Arlington. Evidence of this of this kind of dynamic already exists when we look at Fire Station 7 in Fairlington. It's very close to the Alexandria and Fairfax border, and in fact, 60% of the calls in Station 7 that Station 7 answers in out of the Fairlington station are in Alexandria or Fairfax. That's great for our partnership. It means a lot that we have this reciprocal relationship, but it doesn't make sense for us to invest a lot of money in a facility and repeat what we already have in terms of Fairlington by giving the resources to Fairfax as much as we would. So we want to maintain that balance with a location that can better serve the Arlington community, still be a part of that reciprocal agreement that we have, but balance the demands that we have here in the county. At the end of the day, the board will make a decision about where this fire station goes. You've heard that there's going to be a task force put together that will go through all of the information that was in part delivered to the community back during the summer. I want to take a moment to make this observation. We probably could have done better in the public process that we rolled out during the summer. The process that we used, we made some assumptions that we probably should not have made, not the least of which was that this issue had been out there and understood by the community harking all the way back to 2001, 2002. In fact, there were discussions with various components of the community about this potential move. Various people had met with some civic associations, some civic leaders, and when we went into this situation, we believed that there was a better understanding of the long-term desire to move that fire station. As the then fire chief, I felt that it was my responsibility to put forward the best recommendation based on professional standards. And that's really what we went into as we made a recommendation to the manager for Station 8 to be included in the CIP a couple of years ago. So that's sort of the situation as we find ourselves in today. I'm looking forward to our other presenters and their perspectives, and I look forward to the questions that you might have after all the presentations. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jim. Our second presenter will be Darnell Carpenter from the Hollis Hills Highview Park community.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Oh. I have rarely been told that no one can hear me well. Is that better? And I've got a few hard copies, color, if anyone has any problem viewing the presentation. Again, my name is Darnell Carpenter, and I'm born and raised on Halls Hill, family, part of the original settlers there many moons ago. And I'm a descendant of those who actually built and constructed. Oh, you need more? Can you hear me now okay? Gotta actually hold it. Okay. All right, here we go. Again, Darnell Carpenter, born and raised on Halls Hill, built a home, live there now. Family, I'm a descendant of those who actually built the original station and the settlers in the community. Again, my position is practical, straightforward, and pragmatic, and one that's built upon looking at, evaluating the numbers and supporting the move from 70 from Lee Highway around the corner, a half mile up here, consistent with the objectives of the county board and the staff recommendation in order to provide increased and enhanced delivery of health and services to a population that's been underserved and hasn't been responded to adequately. And because the station is dilapidated, deteriorating, and basically a tear down provides an opportunity to move the station to a location that better serves this entire service area. And at the end of this, I hope you will find merit in my position and stance as well. Let's see. Relocation of Fire Station 8 from Highview Park to Old Dominion has merit. First and foremost, it improves the health, safety outcomes throughout this service area, provides enhanced medical response time to a segment of the community far north that has experienced in excess of 8+ minutes in response time within the nationally accepted, excellent response time of 6 minutes or less. The goal here is not to deteriorate the historical legacy of what's occurred on Lee Highway, but given the need to replace the fire station, where is it best suited to be placed to serve the greatest number of people? Now, we in Highview don't lose out. We receive an excellent an exceptional response time right now. Less than 2 to 3 minutes. That will, our response time goes from exceptional all the way down to excellent, to 4 to 5 minutes with this being moved. So yes, and secondarily, we create a state-of-the-art firehouse with facilities and equipment needed for the next 50 years. Again, just had the pleasure of meeting this young lady who's building a house on Culpeper Street, and she can't, Fire Station 8 couldn't be built today on that site if we had to knock it down now. You can't park it, you can't accommodate this. We need a co-ed facility. There were not women firefighters back then. We've got to build a co-ed dormitory, and we need the space to meet the challenges and needs of the future. As I say here, we require, what's needed is a 4-bay station, a full commitment of apparatus, highest and best use of personnel, create no disruption in service, equipment storage and training room, co-ed living quarters, ability to meet future demand. Existing site is unable to accommodate not only the present needs, but couldn't even begin to address the future needs. Build on the example of Highview Park's historic significance is not diminished by a relocation. The whole historic, yes, it's more passionate, it's more emotional, it's all those things. But the original facility was torn down the historic building built by my family and many here was torn down in the 60s, and. Not only that, but the existing structure has no architectural significance and is obsolete and classified as a tear down. I think, the present historic nature is understandably, passionate, it's sentimental, but that doesn't make it rise up to something that needs to be preserved and saved. In a fire station that's built built with public funds, we're not entitled to a fire station being there in perpetuity just because my granddaddy's great uncles and all of them built it way back when. And another point to the historic nature, nothing more is happening now than occurred at Boston, than occurred at Cherrydale, than occurred at Falls Church. Each and every time those original fire stations became dilapidated and obsolete, a decision had to be made, where do we put the next one to better serve the community? The Wilson Boulevard, the fire station on Wilson is a prime example, a half mile away from its original location. Sure, I'm sure there were some members of the Ball family who foot the bill of that one in Braswell, you remember back then, 1920. I'm sure there's some members of the Ball family who probably squawked and were upset because their families contributed to the construction of that building. But when that building became obsolete, a decision had to be made to move it to where the demographics were requiring. The same thing happened in Cherrydale. You know, the historic Cherrydale fire station that you all know now, that was the second one. The first one was torn down back in the 70s or so, but that was further down the street. I remember, you know, Jim Hunter used to tell me he remembers seeing the kids from Highview Park walking down Lee Highway going to school. My grandmother and others, they walked down to Roslyn, took the trolley across Key Bridge and went on to school. You know, so what's happening now is no different than what occurred in Boston. Falls Church fire stations on Broad Street. It's about a quarter mile away from it. So people have right to be, you know, passionate, but in the end, the decision that's being made by the county board and the fire department is no different than the decisions made when any fire department becomes obsolete and a tear down. And the highest and best use of the dollars presented is to move it to land that we already have. Okay, clickety click. Uh-oh. Okay, well, y'all just gonna have to, relocation of Fire Station 8 from Highview. Uh-oh, but I went backwards. Which one is, got you. Now, the only scenario that could please Highview Park, who wants to keep a fire station, and Old Dominion community who wants nothing on that site, is to split the baby or a two-station scenario. The biggest problem about that, and you're gonna hear a whole bunch of numbers in the minutia about response times and all of that, the bottom line is moving the fire station toward, further this way provides greater coverage and ability to respond to a segment of the community who have response times in excess of 8 to 9 minutes now, bringing them into 5 to 6 minutes without a big compromise to us. You know, you can get in, but before you even get to a two-station scenario, or whether there should be a ambulatory auxiliary building up here, some other place other than Old Dominion, a site still to be determined, the county board has to decide, hey, where do we put, do we create another service area? And then the county board's going to ask staff to look around the county and prioritize. Guess what? Our community, this community is the last community, another fire station or even auxiliary. I tried to bring a map, but I couldn't fit it into the little cutie boxing. But we're unique because we're the only neighborhood, be it Highview Park, Waycroft, Woodlawn, Yorktown, even here in Old Dominion, we've got 4 fire stations less than 2 miles from us. We're in the proverbial sweet spot, and Virginia Hospital Center is in Highview Park. The barriers, like I said, I say we build upon what the firefighters who serve there, they would have had every right. No one would have begrudged them, those African-American firefighters, to only serve Highview, but they did not. They served this area in Old Dominion. They served Yorktown. They demonstrated the golden rule when our country did not, when our state did not, and when this county and community did not. They served all over, and it in no way detracts from their service moving the station around the corner, because it'll still be Station 8 with a proud heritage and still contribute to this community in an exemplary manner. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Alexandra Bossian, the president of the Langston Civic Association.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me. My name's Alexandra Bossian. I am the current president of John M. Langston Citizens Association, which is encompassed of Halls Hills Highview Park. Let me begin. My community, Halls Hills Highview Park, has been extremely disheartened by the level of engagement from the county in regards to the fire station. Many members of our community feel disrespected, unengaged, and kind of passed over. Fire Station 8 has a rich history and is considered one of the cornerstones of our community. So yes, we are very passionate about Fire Station 8 and what the future holds for this parcel of land. With that being said, we are attuned to the overall needs of our fellow Arlingtonians, especially those in the far north parts of the county, and concur with the county board that safety improvements are necessary to provide the most equitable emergency response times across the county. Yet the information provided thus far does not support, nor does it provide justification as to why moving the fire station is beneficial to all citizens in the service area. Will siting Fire Station 8 approximately 5 blocks away from its current location solve the primary concerns indicated by the county? And that's what we're going to discuss tonight. In previous comments by Jim Schwartz, the former Arlington Fire Chief, he stated that the current location of Fire Station 3 was actually poorly placed. The 2002 Tri-Data report recommended that both Fire Station 3 and Fire Station 8 be placed further north of the county. Cited where it is, Cherrydale does nothing to improve response time in the northernmost sections of the county. Last night, I took the time to refresh my knowledge on what happened with the Cherrydale Task Force and their charge. And based on my research, this is what I read, and I thought this was kind of pertinent to this conversation. Pursuant to the provisions of the charge, the task force limited the scope of its consideration to the matters that concern the future location of Station 3 only. This meant that the task force could not discuss issues related to Fire Station 8, also located nearby on Lee Highway. For some, this was a difficult and frustrating constraint. In my opinion, this charge tied the hands of the task force and prevented them from examining the issues in a greater context. So what's the goal? If it's truly about response time, then let's address it. Let's look at the problem holistically and not in this piecemeal approach, which was tried in the past and failed. Let's close the gap. This time we must take this opportunity to develop a comprehensive fire and safety plan and not a silo ourselves by only looking at Fire Station 8, without looking at the situation as a whole. The biggest mistake we could make is to move Fire Station 8 and then in 5 to 10 years say, oops, my bad. We should have moved it further away or not at all. I'm going to open up, this is straight from the county website. This is a map that the county staff was nice enough to put together, so I didn't do it. And let's see. I don't know how to make it bigger, but we'll talk about it. So this map shows the fireboxes. Fireboxes are essentially geographic zones in which a station provides service. Okay, and so that's why you have this map, so I can kind of explain that. There are a total of 19 fireboxes that are served by Fire Station 8, of which 6 of them are located within the underserved area of the far north areas of Arlington. And so now we're going to go to my presentation really quickly. No, that's not mine. Okay. And, I should be like super power. Slide, yeah. From beginning. Okay. Now I can use the little clicker, right? Okay. All right, so basically, on this slide, it shows that, and this data is all I put together was a pie chart. This data can be looked up, Fire Station 8, Arlington County, and the data is strictly from the information provided by the county staff. And so we put it in a pie chart so it's easier to understand. This data is from the 2010 to 2014. Of that, 1,401 calls, of which 7,431 calls serviced by Fire Station 8. So there's 7,431 calls that Fire Station 8 obtains, of which 1,401 of them are from the far, far north. Okay? And so, as you can see, well, you can see it for yourself. The next slide is the EMS calls. Moving Fire Station 8 will cost valuable time for most of the calls Fire Station 8 represents today, which is 62% of the 7,431 calls are for EMS. And as you can see, 10% is strictly is the service that we give to the far north. So the question I have today is, how many total households, and some of these questions I've proposed in previous meetings, and some of you were there, and I still don't have an answer to, is how many total households are served in the farthest point in Arlington? I understand that moving the fire station will decrease response time for approximately 3,000 households, but what effect will it have on the many thousands of households currently being served? What is the impact of this move? Additionally, if we look at the recent work being undertaken by the Lee Highway Alliance, it is becoming increasingly evident that densities are going to continue to increase in the areas around Lee Highway as we continue to grow and expand. Can we obtain a true forecast as to how much this average will expand by if this move occurs? It was previously noted that the impact would be minimal, but are we in fact robbing from Peter and giving to Paul? Darnell mentioned earlier about that our response time is about 3 minutes. However, again, you guys can go onto the county website. The average response time with Fire Station 8 is indicated by county staff in the last 5 years, which is based on the firebox, is actually 4 minutes and 3 seconds in the current location, and in the current high density location. So these are food for thought kind of concepts. With increased densities come increased call volumes. We may be setting ourselves up for a bigger problem if we move our fire EMS protection away from Lee Highway. Even the composition of this panel calls into question the needs, the desire of the community for which this charge is meant to serve. Question: are the far north Arlington residents complaining about the length of fire and EMS response time? If that were the case, you would think they would want to be here and voice their position. They would be on this panel right now, talking beside me. Quickly pushing along plans to move Fire Station 8 is short-sighted and will likely create more problems in the future as Lee Highway corridor expands. The neighborhood that hosts Fire Station 8 enjoys having it. Yeah, we like it. And the neighborhood where the county wants to place the fire station doesn't really want it. They're missing out. It seems clear to me that the solution should be sought to create a modern fire station that can serve the needs of the community in the most equitable manner. We need to be forecasting towards the future. We need to think before we react. We need to not piecemeal our ideas. We need to look at holistically what the problems are and decide based on what the problem is. Okay, I think my time is up.
Thanks, Alexandra. Our final speaker this evening will be Richard Lulich, the president of the Old Dominion Citizens Association.
Thank you very much, Scott. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. All right. First of all, I want to thank the Committee of 100 for inviting me to participate in this panel tonight. Because as you know, the Old Dominion Citizens Association is very involved in this whole discussion, and we want to make sure that our voice is heard. As I think Alexandra referred to before, both the Old Dominion Citizens Association and the Langston Brown Civic Association, both groups are committed to working with the county and affected neighborhoods to find a solution to the inadequate fire and EMS service, not only to the far north of the county, as we've heard tonight, but other areas of the county as well. We want this, as Alexandra said, we want this to be a holistic solution and holistic discussion. During the past summer, the Old Dominion Citizens Association, with the help of other professionals, did an in-depth analysis of the actual fire call response time statistics that were provided by the county from 2010 and 2014. During that analysis, interestingly enough, and we thought it was just going to really focus on Fire Station 8, but actually we found that the slow response times are not just an issue for Fire Station 8, but rather a county-wide problem. So what I would like to propose to you tonight for discussion is, are we actually looking at the right problem, or is there something else going on here? I would say that we need to turn it on its head, and that actually the problem is, how do we fix the fire response time in all of Arlington County? As I said before, the call response time issue is not just a Fire Station 8 issue, as Jim Schwartz knows, but all over the county. So we believe that part of the charge of the soon-to-be announced task force will include an analysis of response times from all fire stations. And in this way, we can identify and implement improvements that not only benefit Fire Station 8, which we want to do, but all county fire stations and all Arlington County citizens. Now, what I'd like to do is just kind of share with you some of the analysis that we found. See if I can do this right. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to take you through, it should be 10, we have 10 fire stations in Arlington County. And so I wanted to, what we did is we took the data that was supplied by the fire station, by the fire department from 2010 to 2014, and you'll see in these pie charts what we found out. You'll see that here's Fire Station 8. Now 85% of the calls received during that time exceeded the 4-minute standard, so definitely a problem for Fire Station 8. Let's look at some others though. Here's Fire Station 1, South Glebe Road, down near Thomas Jefferson Community Center. We see that 65% there were above the 4-minute standard, so they have an issue as well. Fire Station 2, which is Ballston, it does better. It only has 42% that were above the 4-minute standard. Now, Fire Station 3, this is the newest fire station in Cherrydale, 88% were above the 4-minute standard in response times. Going to Clarendon, Fire Station 4, and this is where we talk, as Mr. Schwartz said, we talked about density, population density. 72% were above the 4-minute standard. Fire Station 5, a similar story. This is Aurora Highlands. 56% were above that 4-minute standard. Fire Station 6, which is one of our newest stations, right there at the boundary of Falls Church and Arlington, we see that 90% were above the 4-minute standard. And Fire Station 8, which is in Fairlington, and that's the one that Mr. Schwartz talked about, that it straddles Alexandria and Arlington, 32% were above the 4-minute standard. And Fire Station 9, which is Walter Reed, 71% were above that standard. And finally, Fire Station 10, which is Roslyn, 15% were above that standard. So anyway, it's interesting, what you can find out from statistics and actual response times. And based on that, we really do feel that the issue, the problem is not Fire Station 8. Fire Station 8 has its own problems, of course. It's an old facility. It's in need of extensive repairs or rebuild. But really, the problem that we're all faced with as citizens of Arlington County, the problem is response time across the county. And we think that's where the discussion needs to go. Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to invite all four of our panelists to come and take the table up to my left. Now we begin, as they take their seats, we'll begin the question and answer portion of the evening.
I'm in the Old Dominion Citizens Association, and my question is, I think probably for Chief Schwartz, former Chief Schwartz, is an explanation of exactly what a response time is. In other words, my question is, when I dial 911, at what point of time does that response time begin?
The response time is to be measured based on what kind of call it is. The response time should be measured after what we after what we refer to as turnout time. Turnout time means the call is dispatched, the fire station is notified. If it is a fire call, the crew gets 80 seconds to get ready, that's called turnout, and start their response. Response time begins then. If it's an EMS call, they have 60 seconds to get ready to go on the call. So response time is measured at the end of turnout to the arrival at the incident scene.
I'm curious as to the reciprocity we get from Fairfax County, Alexandria. We go over there. How often do they come over here?
So we have among the most unique operating arrangements, operating agreements with our partner jurisdictions. We do what we call automatic aid, which means we dispatch each other's resources. It means that we send the closest unit to the request for service regardless of the jurisdiction. How much we give and how much we get, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but in general, we get more from Fairfax than we give to them. We give more to Alexandria than we get from them. Overall, the agreement balances on as far as the region is concerned. And I just want to note that in just a couple of days, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of that operating agreement. December 12th of this year will be the 40th anniversary of the NOVA agreement.
I was the president of John M. Langston Civic Association, and I've lived in that community since 1968. I asked a question at two of the former meetings. Is this a done deal? I don't know who want to answer that tonight or who can answer that. I think the chief has had a shot at that twice. But the question I really want to ask you, who can answer the audience tonight? What will be the charge to the newly appointed committee by the county board, and what is the time frame? What is the time frame? I know we have two newly elected officials in Arlington, and will it be before they leave the board or after they leave the board?
I wish that I could quote to you the charge that was approved by the board about a month ago. I apologize, and I did not bring the written document with me. But I'll be glad to send it, to whomever for distribution. What I would say is that it is not a done deal by any means. The board is in the process of appointing a task force to the question of what is the timeline. The original deliberation by the board envisioned that the task force would report back in mid-March. Because it has taken longer to put the task force together than I think anticipated, that time will likely slide, perhaps as late as early May, but we want to get the decision into the capital improvement budget process that's sort of waiting at the end of this for us.
My name is Wilma Jones-Kilgo. I am also a resident of Halls Hill, Highview Park, also a former president of the John M. Langston Citizens Association, and I am a third-generation resident and raising fourth-generation residents of Arlington's Halls Hill neighborhood right now. And I was at the meeting where the charge information was determined, and I do feel like the charge is extremely narrow because it does not address the issues about overall response time. And just following up, my question has to do with the issue about the response times and why the issue of the time from when a resident calls to when the dispatch is done is not being a part of the charge. Is there any way to address some of the things that maybe residents feel were not included in the charge that are, to us, very important matters?
So in part what Wilma is referring to is the Tri-Data study correctly identified the fact that at the time the study was done, the call processing times, in other words, when you call 911 and the Emergency Communications Center answers the phone, has to process the call through the computer-aided dispatch system and then dispatch it, were outside the bounds of that national standard.
Can you state what they were, please?
I'm sorry, I cannot recall exactly.
Like 6 minutes or more?
Oh, no. No, they were the averages were off by in the neighborhood of 30 seconds. And again, there's two different standards for the different kinds of calls. I'm glad to get that data for you. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. When we received that, we went back to the Emergency Communications Center, which the fire department doesn't operate. We are customers of them in a sense, and pointed that out to them. The Emergency Communications Center redoubled their efforts. They now monitor call processing times every month so that they can report back performance to their employees and report that back to the fire department leadership and in a different way, the police department leadership. So we did take some corrective measures there. I want to note at virtually the same time, the national standard was altered. This had nothing to do with Arlington. There was simply a reflection that more and more calls today to the 911 centers everywhere come by way of cell phone, which means we cannot locate where they are. And so, in matter of fact, we just got a report yesterday in Arlington, 74% of the 911 calls we receive in Arlington come from cell phones. No, exactly. But what I'm saying is the national standard was increased. The amount of time to process the call was increased in recognition of the fact that a cell phone call takes longer to process. Now, just for everybody's understanding, this is going to change radically in the next couple of years because we are moving to something called Next Generation 911. It's going to be a whole new technology, different way of doing 911 calls. And we will probably make adjustments again once that technology is upon us.
We talk about where, we talk about when, we talk about need. But Jim, what I understand is the current location, Darnell, you said it, you could confirm it please, that we don't have and can't buy more land around the current location. Let me finish. The current location, no air conditioning for those firefighters. Too small for those firefighters, too small for the amount of equipment and modern equipment inside. We have to park outside. We are stuck, aren't we, to not be able to build on that site. And so all these questions tonight, shouldn't we we need to look at where is an adequate site to rebuild, I think.
To the core of your question, the current property that the county owns that the fire station sits on would take quite a feat of engineering to design a firehouse that could fit there to meet all of our needs. We would need to acquire more property. We have had a couple of owners of adjacent properties approach the county with a willingness to sell, but that's not all. And again, depending on how the design would look, there might be more property required. We have talked to the Japanese Auto. I think everybody's familiar with the Japanese Auto place that is there. They are not interested in doing business. They're not interested in selling. So that would limit us on that side. Whether or not a full design to reach all of our goals for the modern facility that is the antithesis of what you described is still an open question and is dependent on whether or not the three homeowners on the other side of the building would be willing to sell.
I know we've had a lot of technical type questions. Do any of their panelists want to address any of these?
Sure. This is Darnell Carpenter. And again, the basis of my support for the move and my background, I'm not passionate about, the bricks and the sticks, especially since those aren't the ones that, the folk built back in, the 30s and 40s. But the fact is, if anybody had visited that site, it's a deplorable condition for our firefighters to have to live and reside. Women can't be assigned up there. It's time we couldn't build a 2-bay fire station there if we knocked that down and built it again. So we're at the same point. We're at the same point as Ballston, as Cherrydale, as Falls Church, and having to make a decision, okay, now that one needs to be torn down, where can we put in our community deserves a state-of-the-art 4-bay fire station that can accommodate the needs of the future without, a two scenario option is going to be so expensive. And then, that runs into it. We've got to find a parcel of land to buy, not only, and all of the implications that mean, and the highest and best use of our tax dollars is to build out the facility that we know we can accomplish the needs on a site that we already own without an exponential rise in expenditure.
Yes, I would like to comment on that. I agree that the current fire station is in deplorable condition and needs to either be replaced or rebuilt or moved. And Darnell mentioned that we need to have a state-of-the-art 4-bay fire station. And if one is built up in this area, Mr. Schwartz said at a public meeting recently that there would not be a fully staffed advanced life support unit, which is another word for ambulance. And since the majority of the calls to the far north of the county are EMS related, what that means is the current situation for that response would not change, and because those don't come from Fire Station 8 anyway. Those come from Ballston or Clarendon or from Falls Church.
If I could just add to that, just to be clear, every member of the Arlington County Fire Department is a firefighter and an emergency medical technician. And every engine in the county is minimally staffed with at least one paramedic. So Station 8 has a paramedic at the station who rides the engine. Engines are almost always the first to arrive at EMS calls simply because of their proximity. And the figures for Station 8's response area, 2/3 of the calls being EMS, that is countywide. Every area of the county, 2/3 of the calls are EMS related.
Okay, the other comment that I needed to just make is that we were mentioning 4-bay. What was understood is that the 4th bay would be used for storage. So just so you know, if we don't need 4 bays, then we need to make sure whatever we spend our money on, we use it and we use it to the fullest, and that we don't continue to just spend, say, oops, my bad, and keep on going. We need to really have correct accountability, okay?
I live in Halls Hill, but the other side of the street of Columbus is Old Dominion. And my backyard is the driveway of the firehouse. My question is, how did this all get started? I don't understand because it sounds to me like per capita, the fire station sounds like it's in a good place right now. And I don't know if it was ever considered buying up that other property, the Japanese Auto Clinic and the houses and the duplex. Why did this ever get started? And the response time also, compared to all the other fire stations, sounds very good. So I don't understand how this whole thing got started. I got into it a couple years ago, but not when it got started. So, and I've asked a few people, and nobody knows who wanted this, and why has it gone so far already? Because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, well, one thing is that I believe it was in the CIP, and so this conversation.
I don't know what a CIP is, I'm sorry.
The capital improvement.
Everybody's talking to me.
The capital improvement plan, it was in the CIP for a fire station, and I think that's when it raised red flags, that's when conversations began, and it's like, how did it,
Who does the CIP? I mean, logically, this, yeah, but okay.
Right,
I just want to know the origin.
No, Ms. Schwartz, it goes way farther back than just the CIP. The conversation about moving the fire station, 15, 20 years ago, I would say Ron Carly approached the community in the Tri-Data study, suggesting that one, the fire station is dilapidated and needs to be replaced, and two, there was a need among the community to provide better service farther north side Arlington. That's been Ron Carly's position and the position of almost every county manager since, and this is just a culmination of that, and it got put into the CIP funded for 20 some odd $20 million, and the county, the timing was such that they were able to acquire the property here in Old Dominion, which kind of precluded them from needing to also negotiate and buy the Japanese Auto Clinic. So it was kind of almost foregone. Well, if we're going to expand Old Dominion, we'll put the new fire station whenever we get that put into the fire station and have the new fire station at Old Dominion. So this is kind of like a combination of about 25 or so plus years to get to this point.
I just want to reiterate in answer to your question about other stations having response time issues. There is no doubt. This is a very complex environment. We are an urban village with a high demand for services, including emergency services. Station 8 is the only station that cannot meet its response time goals because of where it's located. All the other stations have issues with response time goals, but that has to do more with activity in their response areas. The answer to that, the solution to those problems, is to add more units to the fire stations that already exist. We don't solve the issue with Station 8 by putting more units there.
Tried to get as many questions as we could. Thank you, everyone, and apologies to those who couldn't get in there. Thank you to our speakers. Can we get one last round of applause for them?